Jazz have a big summer coming up. They've got money to spend. They've got good players and a good foundation now. They've established that they're one of the best 5 or 6 teams in the West. Now can they take that next step? As you look from the outside in at the Utah Jazz, what do you see now, and what do you see them doing this summer to try to take that next step?
Well, their point guard position is going to be really fascinating. I think that, realistically, Ricky Rubio has already kind of publicly admitted that he will not be on this team next year. And I feel that, Dante Exum, who did get himself a fairly generous contract, still has not quite proven that he's in a position of, being a viable starting point guard quite yet. And mostly, I think that, we really sometimes get a little ahead of ourselves when it comes to injury prone versus has been injured. I don't know if I would say that Dante Exum is injury prone as much as I've said that he's been suffering from some really unfortunate freak injuries over the last few years. And they're very troubling, obviously, for his development. If he had a full offseason of being able to be active, you could see him get better. So for me, I find that once the Jazz kind of figure out what that backcourt is going to look like next to Donovan Mitchell, I expect Derek Favors to walk, one way or the other in terms of, whose decision it was, because I just find that he's not the right player next to Gobert, who I believe is, one of the best players in the NBA. I don't imagine that the Jazz will offer Gobert the supermax extension that he'll be eligible for, which I think will frustrate him. But I think he might recognize that given his lack of offensive upside, he might not be warranted of such a deal. I think that will save them a little bit of cap room. And I think that, building around Donovan Mitchell and building around Rudy Gobert will be very interesting because those are very good players, obviously. But I think once they're going to need to find a point guard on a good value contract who, whether it's through the draft or otherwise, can really make a good indentation in the league. I find that, the draft is probably not the most effective way of getting in to build talent that's ready to play immediately, though, unless you're going for like a senior who played all 4 years. But even Grayson Allen was like that. He didn't exactly make a dent off the bat, at least not yet. And I feel that, you look at what the Jazz have for the draft picks, right? And, it's going to be interesting to see what they can actually make of that because, obviously, they have the 23rd pick in the draft, and that could be at least a decent player. But they also have the 53rd pick, which I think is going to be an interesting spot to get somebody who's not necessarily on a guaranteed deal. I feel there have been some interesting players that have come through the Jazz on workouts, though. Grant Williams from Tennessee is somebody who I think is one of my favorite players in this draft. I also like Keziak Paula from Stanford and Mithyandu Kabengele, Carson Edwards. Those are all players. Dylan Windler, who I think can make an immediate impact. So I think across the board, actually, they've brought in a lot of players that I like a lot, who I think can be very interesting players for them, who are going to be available for them too. They're not kind of thinking bigger. One guy who I think they should look at for sure is Terrence Davis, out of Ole Miss. He's been one of my favorite risers in this draft process. And I feel that Terrence Davis is somebody who can make an immediate impact. He was just such an amazing player during scrimmages, both at the G League Elite Camp and the NBA Draft Combine as well. Portsmouth all tournament for all seniors. And I know that I've mentioned a lot of names right now, but that's a name that I think we should really pay attention to for them.
Hey, Bryan, thanks for coming on today. Really appreciate it. Keep up the good work. We enjoy reading your stuff, and we'll talk to you again.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me.
There you go. Bryan Kalbrosky with us from Hoops Hype and USA Today.